on television, on radio after that. And before I say my piece, Keith, we know that you, and me for that matter, would have voted for Mike Trout for MVP.
Yep.
I think you're a little bit more disappointed in the result. I can at least, I can't really make a good case for Cabrera, but I understand why Cabrera won. All right.
Well,
so
yeah,
I'm disappointed,
doesn't make
but
it
doesn't make it right.
I'm not disappointed. Would imply that I thought there was a chance Trout would win. I never really did.
I didn't either.
Yeah, I mean, I thought I'm only disappointed in the sense that, again, we the Baseball Writers Association have shown through actually really through all the awards, but particularly this one this year, that we refuse to change. We refuse to adapt. And follow the industry we're covering. This is the embarrassing part of it. It's not just that we picked the wrong guy. And I didn't vote on it. I would have voted Trout, obviously. But I'll say we because I'm in the organization, too. I have a ballot, just a different ballot this year. We continue to fall further behind the people we ostensibly are assigned to cover. And, it's funny because I saw all of these Deadspin has a list of Cabrera voters. Well, I think they got everybody, but there were more Cabrera voters who explained why they voted the way they did. And a couple of them cited, well, the players told me that Cabrera was more valuable. Well, that's just the players you happen to talk to. And, Brandon McCarthy, for example, has come out and said pretty clearly he thinks Trout was more valuable. So it's not all players. But also, the players aren't the evaluators, right? The evaluators are the people in the front office. If you talk to GMs, assistant GMs, scouting directors, statistical analysts, whatever, you're going to get very different answers. Those are the people whose job it is, at least, to do the analysis, to do the evaluations. And you don't necessarily have to agree with those people, but if you're covering the industry, you need to understand what they're doing. I mean, this is like somebody trying to cover the computer industry, the technology industry, and not understanding how the internet works, thinking the internet is a series of tubes, and yet still continuing to cover this. You cannot cover this industry if you don't understand that Mike Trout was substantially more valuable this year than Miguel Cabrera. There is no logical counterargument. There's no defending Cabrera. You have to rely on logical fallacies. Oh, well, his team made the playoffs. Oh, well, he was better down the stretch. Oh, he was better when it counted. He was good in the clutch. He was selfless, and he made this transition to third base.
He was more feared. That's my favorite one.
He was more feared. I got that this morning.
Yeah.
Defense has never counted in MVP before. Why should it count now? Well, now people are saying, well, 22 of 28 first place votes went to Cabrera. Therefore, he clearly was the MVP, which is basically an argument to appeal to popularity. We've got all kinds of fallacious arguments in support of Cabrera, but no valid ones. You have to redefine valuable in a way that is not internally logical and is far too easy to change from year to year to suit whoever you want to be the MVP. There are no internally consistent arguments that Trout wasn't far more valuable. People have to twist themselves into knots to try to denigrate Trout, and really the only one that seems to have any kind of consistency at all is to say that, well, Cabrera's team made the playoffs and Trout's didn't, which any rational observer can look and say, well, the Angels won more games, just played in a tougher division. I mean, Detroit played in the cupcake division of the American League. That shouldn't be held against Cabrera, but it shouldn't be the point in his favor that gives him the MVP award, which really, at the end of the day, it was. I think if Trout makes the playoffs and Cabrera doesn't, these results are probably pretty different, even if Cabrera does win the Triple Crown.
I think the shame of it for me is that these are two players who had amazing seasons, I believe. Okay, maybe you don't agree that Cabrera had an amazing season. I agree that he had an amazing season, and in most years I would have voted him for MVP. I think Trout was more valuable this season, as you do. But these guys, unfortunately, got caught in the middle of a media firestorm that neither one of them deserved to be in. And both of these guys aren't, I don't think, prepared for it. One has had off-the-field troubles, which shouldn't have any effect on the vote. The other is 21 years old and is staying at his parents' house, close to where I live in New Jersey. And this poor child has to deal. Not child, okay, I don't mean that. But this poor kid has to deal with this. And
sound like you're going to go warm up his bottle.
Well, these ridiculous questions from people in the media about, like, you didn't have more RBIs and you weren't there in April and runners in scoring position. Just, look, I don't agree with the result. What I don't understand, and I was embarrassed for the media yesterday, people we work with, people on radio, TV, internet, whatever it is, the name calling. I'm not going to rip any colleagues. I never do. Certainly I've had chances to and the reason to. But if you want to rip sabermetrics, I don't think the reason why I would have voted for Trout or Cabrera really has a whole lot to do with sabermetrics. All right, I don't think that's the reason. But I'm just stunned that other media members have to call people that they don't agree with names. It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, someone doesn't agree with your opinion. All right, so you're a this and you're a that. We have a better system of evaluation than we did 30, 20 years ago. Why aren't we using it? But then again, we're not using instant replay either. So I was embarrassed by what I saw on radio, on TV, on Twitter, for people calling you out, threats. I can't believe what I saw yesterday was worse than I even had imagined, and all because of an award that Miguel Cabrera won over Mike Trout, which is kind of ridiculous to me. So I'm going to remember this for a long time, and for the wrong reasons. I was embarrassed by what happened. I wasn't embarrassed because Cabrera won. I was embarrassed because of all the firestorm afterwards. And people who don't know me saying what they think. Or you. You tell us why, I guess in a nutshell here, because your stuff's Insider, and some of the people that listen to our show don't read Insider. In a nutshell, you can't make a single argument for Cabrera, and what's your ultimate argument on Trout, aside from sabermetrics? Because I think people that don't understand sabermetrics are just going to rip it automatically. But would you have voted for Trout because of sabermetrics?
No, because it's common baseball sense. That's really what it is. Sabermetrics just helps you craft an argument that can be dissected and potentially refuted, although nobody's managed to do so in a remotely satisfactory way for Trout. People who are trying to make the Cabrera argument have to run away from numbers or have to cherry pick. They have to arbitrarily look at numbers from certain time periods that favor Cabrera and ignore all the time periods that don't favor Cabrera. The argument for Trout is it's just Trout versus Cabrera. Let's leave any other candidates out of the discussion for the moment. The two players were very close to equal offensively. There's a slight edge to Cabrera. They got on base at basically the same rate. Cabrera hit for more power. He played in a better ballpark. He faced much worse competition. But we'll give him a small edge in the power department. Trout played a tougher position, played it really well. Cabrera is a below-average defender. He's bad at third. He's bad at first, too. So in the position switch, he actually gets some credit for playing a tougher position. But still, he's not good there. Trout added a ton more value on the bases. He's a better runner. He's a better base stealer. He stole 49 out of 54, but also adds more value because he can advance more when he's on base and there's a hit from someone behind him. He also, again, faced much tougher competition over the course of the season than Cabrera did. So if you give Cabrera this slight edge on offense, I'm not using any numbers here. Just recognize Cabrera had a slight edge on offense. He was better. He was not as much better as people who point to the Triple Crown think, because they're failing to credit how good Trout was offensively. Cabrera gets a slight edge on offense. Trout destroys him on defense, on base running, once you factor in the tougher ballpark, and once you factor in the much tougher competition. So what remains for Cabrera? Well, again, either you have to cherry pick certain time periods that favor him and claim that those matter and others don't. That's absurd. Every game in the season is worth one win or one loss in the standings. Or you have to argue, well, Cabrera's team made the playoffs. Well, the Angels actually won more games, played in a tougher division, and none of that had anything to do with Trout. In fact, the Angels were in the tank at the point that Trout came up, and I think they actually had the best record in the American League from the point that he came up to the big leagues. I'd have to double-check that. But okay, so none of this has anything to do with Trout, or for that matter, Cabrera. And Cabrera had a ton of support from Justin Verlander, Austin Jackson, who got shut out from MVP voting. That's almost as big of a joke to me. Prince Fielder, he's pretty good. Max Scherzer. It's not like Cabrera did any of this by himself. He had a good season. He had a lot of teammates who also had really good seasons. And to look at the standings, look at team records, and then give all that credit to Cabrera and ignore the situations in which the two players played is willful ignorance. You are seeing what you want to see, not what was actually there. And I thought Joe Posnanski wrote a great blog post today as a reaction to the voting. He nailed it. Most voters decide who they want to be the MVP and craft the argument afterwards. That's not how I vote. And I will say, I think having the official ballot carries a responsibility to do it the other way, to look at the evidence and then decide who goes where on your ballot, not to decide who's on the ballot and then come up with the evidence that supports it after the fact.
Is the system flawed, Keith? Because if we look at some of the ballots here, and I'm not going to call out people's names, I don't understand how some of these opinions were formed. For example, Clayton Kershaw was left off of a couple ballots. Now, he wouldn't have won the Cy Young anyway. Raul Ibanez was on a ballot and not Robinson Cano. Verlander might have lost the Cy Young because Fernando Rodney got a first-place vote. We'll get to the relief pitching a little bit later.
Didn't Verlander and Price flip on the MVP? Now, granted, it's different voters.
Yeah, but it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense. Which shows you the problem with going extremely subjective here.
Well, how do you fix this?
That's the issue.
Like what's the solution here? I mean, because certainly some of the voters seem to have interesting agendas. Hometown voters voting for their own guys, whatever it is. Odd arguments when you're voting for a certain player or not. What's the better system here to decide who wins these awards?
There isn't one. People said, well, let the fans vote. Well, look at the All-Star voting. You're going to run into the same issues. And then what you're going to have, too, is skew towards teams with larger fan bases or more active fan bases. I don't want that either. Look, the answer is it's going to take time for the pool of voters to get smarter. And I will say the one thing we can do in the Baseball Writers Association is stop being so damn insular about who gets into the club. We've got Fangraphs got one badge this year, and it was Dave Cameron, and I don't believe he voted on any awards. We still refuse to let MLB.com writers in because they are formally affiliated with the teams in the league that they're supposed to cover. Yet when you see all the homer voting that went on earlier this week, the Rockies blogger who put Jordan Pacheco, a replacement-level player, third on his Rookie of the Year ballot. You're going to tell me that we have objectivity? We don't run into conflicts of interest, but the MLB.com guys are? Let them in. Expand the pool. Let our membership get younger. It's going to get younger. It's going to get more educated. It's going to be more expansive. We need more perspectives because you're seeing way too much traditionalism, even provincialism, in the voting this week. And what's going to happen is King Kaufman, who's with Bleacher Report now, who's with Salon, I'd have to pull up his exact quote, but basically pointed out this tells you a lot about the problems of old media, that there's this refusal to change, this reluctance to embrace not statistics but new ways of looking at the game. And I learned a lot from Peter Gammons, who, if you look at his writing over the last 10 years, I'm not sure if I could name another sort of established, highly respected baseball writer who has revolutionized the way that he looks at the game. And he had a ton of experience. And you watch his writing now and how he talks about players, it's totally different from 10 years ago because he was open-minded. You know what? People who are doing well in this game, people I respect, are telling me, let's look at things a little differently, and he learned from them. I didn't always look at the game this way. I was in high school and college. I was, RBIs and pitcher wins and saves. And, you have to learn at some point. It's not like you come out of the womb looking at baseball from this more modern perspective. You have to be open-minded. And you have to be willing to learn and willing to change your opinions and let your opinions evolve over time as you talk to other people, particularly people in front offices who look at the game differently. And we're seeing in our membership a refusal to do so. And they're almost making a stand with some of these votes, saying, no, we're not going to change how we think. And we don't care if you look at us as irrelevant. We are the guardians of information, and we're not going to let these new perspectives come through. We're not going to let them into our membership ranks.